In Matthew chapter 5, we'll be in verses 14 through 16 is where we're at as we continue our look at the Sermon on the Mount. Last week I talked to you about being salt. And so if you weren't here last week and you missed the sermon, I encourage you to check it out on our website, go to our Facebook page, our YouTube page, several ways to check out that sermon because it'll kind of go along with today's sermon as well. But salt, being salt to people. If we're salt to people, people will see Jesus in us. And as Jesus is seen through us and as we manifest Jesus through us, people will begin to see Him. It'll make them thirsty for what we have. And we talked about how salt cannot be hidden. A Christian who is being salt to the earth is one who is being a witness to others around them. But today, as we turn our focus on Matthew chapter 5, today as we look at 5:14 through 16, and we turn to what Jesus calls the light of the world. This is a difference. This is us being open and honest about our Christianity. This is not us trying to hide anything. This is not us trying to be kind of sneaky about it. This is not us trying to sneak around and tell people about our Christian life. This is us being bright. This is us being out in the open. This is us showing everyone about Jesus Christ and the love of Christ. So this morning, as we look at Matthew chapter 5, verses 14 through 16, I want us to see what it means for us today to be the light of the world and what Christ is talking to us about. Beginning in verse 14, Jesus Christ says, "You are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." Last week when I started out with "You are the salt of the earth," Jesus Christ starts out again with "You are the light of the world." I talked about the "you are" here. The "you are" is the beatitude living Christian. It's so important that we need to look at it twice. Jesus is like you, the person that is living the life of Jesus Christ, the one that is living the beatitudes, the way Christ wanted you to live. You are the one that is the salt to the world. You are the one that is the light to the world. You cannot be salt or light if you are living in the world, if you're living like the world. Christ is saying, you that lives with the Beatitudes, you are the one that has to be different. But unfortunately in today's society, that line between Christianity and worldliness has become blurred. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of Christians out there that are not living as salt and light. And we're living in the world and we're living as the world. The church has gotten to a point in many places where it's wavered and it's become under attack. And when it comes under attack, it is said, "Oh, we'll compromise, we will change, we will be more like the world." You see, the world looks at Christianity and it doesn't really like it. It would rather think of Christianity as a myth, a fable, or a crutch, or even some oppressive tool that's been created by man. But you and I, as a beatitude living Christian, we're to show the world the truth of Jesus Christ. We're to show Him the truth, or show the world the truth of Him. You and I must understand, before we go on, to be salt, to be light, we must be living for Jesus Christ. We cannot be salt and light and living as the world lives. People, every day, people in this world are dying without Jesus Christ. Why? Because they have not seen the salt and the light from Christians. They don't understand what is happening. They don't understand what Jesus Christ came and did for them. Why? Because those that Jesus has called to be the salt and the light are not living the way they should. You and I wonder why we have no power against the world, no strength in the world. It's because we're just like the world. And so it is time for us today to wake up and to rise up and learn how to be salt and how to be light. I talked to you last week all about being salt. And so today it's all about being a light to the world. Jesus gave us 2 commands. He said, here's how you live in all the Beatitudes. And then he gives you 2 commands. He says, be salt. And then he said, be light. What does he mean when he says, be light? Being the light is a complex thing to some people. But Jesus Christ really wants us to understand that it's the most simplest thing in the world. When Jesus was talking to the people and he was up on the mountain, all the people were down here listening to him and around him and listening to him. And when he says the words, you are to be the light of the world, to them, they didn't have to scratch their head and say, what's he talking about? I don't understand what he means. To them in that day, those were words that were common. That was a common phrase, the light of the world. It was a title that was given to great teachers, great religious teachers. It was a title that was given to them. The term light of the world was something they would have understood as a teacher. A godly teacher is what you should be. But also, the term light of the world was also known by the Jewish priests. So anybody that was familiar with the Jewish priesthood would have known the light of the world. You see, in the temple, the holy temple in Jerusalem, in the top part of the holy temple in Jerusalem, there stood a holy place. And inside that holy place, there was a lampstand that was about 7 feet tall. This lampstand was about 7 feet tall. It was filled with oil, and from one center stand, 6 other lights were lit from this one center stand. The central shaft that came up was filled with oil, and it would light all the other lampstands. This center shaft was called the light of the world. And when it was placed up in the top of the temple, and it was lit to its fullest, they said you could see it all over Jerusalem when it was lit to its fullest. That's how big it was. And so when Jesus Christ went to them and he mentioned, you are to be the light of the world, they understood what he was talking about. You and I today may not quite understand what Jesus was talking about. But if you jump over to John chapter 8, verse 12, I want you to listen to what Jesus Christ said. John chapter 8, verse 12, Jesus said this, then Jesus spoke to them again, saying, I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of the life, the light of life. So what Jesus is saying here is this. He's called us to be lights to the world, but he's saying this. The light comes from Jesus, not from man. Our light today that we should be comes from Jesus, not from man. When Jesus said, you are to be the light of the world, you are to be a great teacher, you show to others, you should be seen in the world. He was saying that the light comes from him, though. The light comes from Christ, not from us. You and I have no power to light anything. Okay? But you're going, wait a second. Jesus just said we are to be the light of the world. But Jesus before that said you need to live all these ways. And the only way you can live all these ways is if you have Jesus in your heart. You're living for him. You see, the light comes from Jesus. We are to reflect or let God's power, Jesus Christ's light, shine through us is what we are to do. But I got a question for you this morning. What happens if I set a light here and I'm trying to reflect it over here and I put something in between the source of light and the source of the reflection? There's no light reflecting, is there? It's being blocked. You see, our light is to come from Christ. But when we live in the world and we live like the world, we begin to block that light with the world. And Jesus Christ's light cannot shine through us. You and I must understand that we have to be a reflective light for Jesus Christ. And he tells us why. He tells us that we must be a light to Jesus Christ because the world is in darkness. The world is in darkness. You and I must understand today that we have this great light in Jesus Christ, but the world itself is in darkness. Jesus is the light of this world, but the Bible tells us that the light of this world, when the light came in, that men loved darkness more than it loved the light. And because of that, their deeds were evil. The world is full of darkness. The world is full of spiritual darkness. It dominates everything. And when you and I try to live in that darkness, the light of Jesus Christ cannot reflect off of us because the world is blocking it. You and I must understand that Jesus Christ is the only source of light for us. Too many times in our Christian lives, we go out and we try to do things on our own. We try to live on our own. I can handle it on my own. Let me show you on my own. And Jesus Christ is going, no, that is not the way. You are the light in a darkened world because of me, is what Jesus Christ is saying. Jesus Christ is saying because of what He has done, He is the light. This world that is in darkness needs to understand that Jesus is the only light. But John 3:19 says this, and this is the condemnation, that the light has come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light because their deeds were evil. You see, Jesus came to be the light. He came to be the light of the world. But because the world was in darkness, they shunned Him because they liked their evilness. They liked being evil. We could spend hours and hours preaching and teaching on what it means that the world is evil, but I just want you to understand this. We live in a world full of darkness and evil today. And if we are not being the light that Jesus Christ wants us to be in this world today, there will be no light in the world. Jesus Christ has called us to be a light. We are to be lights to this world, not from our own power, but from the power of Jesus Christ. That is what we are to do. He didn't say, if it's okay with you. He didn't say, if you feel like being a light. He says, you are to be the light of the world. You are the light of the world. He wants you and I to be the light of the world. Now, in some ways that should scare us, and in some ways that should make us feel good. But you and I are the light. Jesus has called us to be a light in the dark world. That should thrill us. And we should say, if we are truly believers, I can be a light and I can show other people the path to Jesus Christ. That should make us shout for joy that we can go and be a part of what He wants us to do, and we can be a part of leading others to find light, to find salvation, because He says you and I are called to be the light of the world. We are to let the light of Christ shine through us so that the world can see us. Well, how does that work? How do we let the light of the world, our light of Jesus Christ, shine through us? Well, we have to understand that it comes from Jesus, and the power comes from Him. You see, once again, this goes back to science, and I'm not a science teacher, but when the sun comes up, the sun is the brightest thing in the sky. That's all you can see, really, is the sun. But as the sun goes down, the moon begins to be seen. Well, when you see the light of the moon, the moon produces no light on its own, okay? The moon is doing nothing but reflecting the light of the sun. And you and I are called to do that. You and I are called to do nothing but dazzle the world with Jesus Christ's light. You see, the moon doesn't go up there and click a light switch. The moon doesn't try to put itself in a position where it is greater than the sun. The moon doesn't try to do anything but what it's told to do. And the moon was told by God to stand in the sky and reflect the sunlight on the earth when it gets dark. You and I are the same way. You and I are told by God that we are to be lights to the world. We're not supposed to turn our own light switches on. We're not supposed to move around without God. We are supposed to reflect the Son of God to a world in darkness. That is what you and I are called to do. You and I are not supposed to try to do it on our own. We are to be ones that reflect the light of Jesus Christ, His love filling us and shining bright through us. We have no power. Our light, our power comes through Him, and we shine. The problem is this. Sometimes we try to move around. Sometimes we try to do things on our own. Sometimes, instead of having that big, bright, full moon we see up in the sky, we have that little bitty sliver of a moon that you can barely see. And unfortunately, for most of the world today, that's where most Christians are at today. Most of us are in this little thumbnail that you can barely see. And you and I need to be these full, bright reflections of God that reflects the light of the Son of God. Well, how do we do that? Let me give you a quick example. There was a pastor that was talking about his daughter. He said when she was in first grade, she approached her teacher and said, "Miss Smith, would you come to church?" Miss Smith promised that she would, but when Miss Smith did not show up, his daughter went to her every morning and said, "Miss Smith, you didn't come to church." After a while, the teacher could no longer resist, and finally Miss Smith began to come to church. She came once, and then she came again, and she came again. Finally, she came to know Jesus Christ as her Savior. It says, today, Mrs. Smith is a great worker in the church, but the pastor went on to say, but today his daughter is still a radiant sunbeam. She is still one that invites people every chance she gets to church. She is one that reflects the light of Christ because she is simply asking people to come and see the one that gives her the light. By simply inviting someone to church over and over again, she was a light. You see, this world is in darkness, and all it needs is a little light. So, Jesus told us we are to be the light of the world, but he didn't stop there. If you go on to the next part of the verse, he says you are to be a city on a hill, and then he says you're to be like a lamp that is lit in a house that has not been covered. So he says you're to be a light, and then he gives you some important information about what kind of light you are to be. He gave them a couple examples of how your light should shine. The first thing he says is you are to be a city on a hill. You are to be a city up on a mountain. Now, we traveled the last several weeks. We were in the Rockies. We saw some very, very tall mountains. Saw a lot of snow caps still up there. But I tell you, after dark, you can see a little bitty light up on top of a mountain. It can be seen. When he says you cannot hide a city on a hill, he is true. You cannot hide a city on a hill. Whether it is one light or 1,000 lights, a city on a hill can be seen. What Jesus Christ is telling the people here when he says you are to be a city on a hill, when he says you are to be a light, a lamp that is not covered, he is saying you are not to be hidden. You as a Christian are not to be hidden. If you are a Christian, you are not to be a secret agent that slinks around in the dark and tries to save people. You are not working undercover. Your light should shine bright for everyone to see. You should know your testimony, and you should share it as often as you can. You should know God, and you should share his word as often as you can. You should be serving others in the name of Jesus Christ as often as you can. You should be loving others the way God wants you to love others. You cannot be hidden. You cannot be hidden. If you are a city on a hill or you're a lamp that is in a room, you cannot be hidden. I can imagine when Jesus was talking to the people, and he says, you wouldn't light a lamp in a room and then put a basket on top of it. I can just imagine the people kind of laughing at Jesus with that kind of silly example. Oil was a valuable commodity in those days. Oil was something that not just everyone had to light these candles. So you wouldn't light a lamp in your house and then cover it up. That's what Jesus was saying. The people were looking at him saying, that's foolish. And Jesus looks at us today and says the same thing. It's foolish to cover up your Christianity. It's foolish to cover what Jesus Christ has done for you today. No one would hide a light under a basket. None of us should want to hide what Jesus Christ has done for us. It would be foolish for you and I to hide Jesus Christ from a world that is in desperate need of him. It would be foolish for that. We are not to be hidden. A person, their Christianity should be on full display for the world to see. We should always be out there for the world to see. You see, light cannot be shut out by darkness. Light cannot be shut out from darkness. And that's what he says next. He says, let your light shine. Let your light shine. If you are a light, then let it shine. That's what Jesus said. if you know Him as your Savior, if you're living a beatitude life, He says, I'm not giving you the option. I'm telling you, let your light shine. And when you let your light shine, it is a great thing. Being a light is not a suggestion from Christ. It is a command from Christ. Being a light is not a suggestion. It is a command. If you truly live your life for Christ, guess what? You can't hide it anyway. You can't. Your light is going to shine bright, and people are going to see it whether you try to hide it or not. We should let our light shine brightly. And when you do, it does a lot of things. When you let your light shine brightly, it dispels darkness. It'll heal people. It'll help people grow closer to Christ. I could go on and on and on about the things that it does. But the point is this. When you and I are lights to the world, when you and I are lights to the world, we are a help to the world. We are a help to the world. You and I cannot be afraid of the darkness. Here is what happens. You and I, we want to let our light shine bright. So we go out, and our light is shining. We're living our life for Jesus Christ, and the darkness of the world starts coming in. The darkness of the world comes in, and all of a sudden we get afraid, and fear comes upon us. And all of a sudden our light gets smaller and smaller and smaller. But Jesus Christ says you have no reason to fear the darkness, because darkness cannot survive in light. Light can penetrate any darkness, and darkness has no power over the light. That is what you and I should be. You and I should shine our light brightly in the world and let it penetrate the darkness in the world. You and I need to be that light. And then he tells us why we need to be that light. He tells us we need to be that light for one simple reason: to glorify God. To glorify God. Our light should shine so that we can glorify God. Our light can shine through our light can shine through darkness. Our light can shine through our fears. Our light can shine through all of these things. But the reason our light shines is to glorify God. How do we do that? We can let our works do it. Let our works glorify God. If you go back up to our verses, he says this: let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. You see, our lights shine bright so that God may have glory. People see it through our attractive works. Our lights can shine through our works so great. Men are to see our deeds. They're to see what we do for God. And that's when they will begin to see God's work in their lives. But the problem is this. Our lights today, we try to shine our lights so that we get glory. We try to shine our lights so people can say, look what I did. Instead of trying to reflect the light of Jesus Christ, we try to turn the spotlight on us and say, look what I have done. If we are doing our works for men so that we can get the glory, then we're not letting God's light shine through us. We're not doing what God has called us to do. You see, unfortunately, so many good deeds today are done out of pride, out of arrogance, out of coldness. It repels the light instead of shining the light. You see, the Pharisees were these type of people. The Pharisees will walk around and say, look at me, look at me, look at what I've done, look at how I can help. And the Lord is saying it's not about us. It's about glorifying God in heaven. D.L. Moody gave an example of what this means. He said he was present at a conference, and he said a bunch of young men, young people that were taking their faith very seriously, he thought, got together in a room one night and they held an all-night prayer meeting. After the prayer meeting, they were walking back to the conference and they saw Dr. Moody, and he asked them, he says, well, what, y'all kind of look a little ragged. What you been doing? You know, did you not get any sleep last night? And they looked at him and they said, Mr. Moody, Can't you see how our faces shine? Can't you see how we've spent all night with the Lord in prayer? And we've been going all night in prayer, and our faces should shine with the light of God. Moody looked at them and says, when Moses' face shone, he was hoping that his face wasn't shining, but that God's was the one shining. That's what we must remember. We can't go around and say, oh God, oh people, look at me, look at how great I am. Our life, our light must shine to exalt God, and no other reason. No other reason. The world dishonors God, and therefore the world needs a light to show them that we will honor Him before all. Our conduct will put the light on God and not on ourselves. Our works are for God and should glorify Him. Which brings us to one of my favorite verses in the Bible in closing today, and that's 1 Timothy 4:12. It says, let no one despise your youth, but be an example to the believers in word, conduct, in love, in spirit, in faith, and in purity. If you want to let your light shine, live like this. Live so that others see God in your word. Live so that others see God in your conduct, in the way you love, in the way your spirit is, in the purity of your life, in the faith you have in Him. Live your life like that, and you will be shining God's light to the world every single day. Do this. Shine your light before men. It will not be hidden. It will be a city on a hill. You walk in a room of complete darkness. You turn on a switch, and when the light comes on, the room is illuminated. That is what we are to be. We are to be able to walk out these doors into a dark world, and everywhere we go, it should be illuminated with the love and the conduct and the power of Jesus Christ. I said this last week, and I'll say it again this week. We live in a world that needs light. We live in a world that needs salt. We live in a world that is dying in darkness, that is screaming from the mountaintops, looking for a light. They're desperate. They're looking for the lights everywhere. They're looking for salvation everywhere. I meet with a group of pastors, and we were talking about all the things and all the places people look for salvation. And we were looking at just in our little community here, and we were talking about all the addictions that we have in our community, and things like social media and drugs and alcohol and pornography and gambling, and all these things were mentioned just in our little community. And we were talking about why. Why are these things happening? And they're happening because people are looking for a light, and they're not finding it in the church. They're looking for a light, and they're not finding it from God's people. So they're going out in the world full of darkness, looking for light in the dark. And all they're finding is pain and turmoil. Our world is screaming for a light. And it is up to you and I to take it to them. We can no longer let the world keep us from being salt, and we can no longer let the world keep us from being light. We have to start doing this. We have to be that beacon that stands on a hill and says, there is hope. There is hope today. And that hope is found in Jesus Christ. It's not found in me. It's not found in this church. It's not found in any church around here. It is found in Jesus Christ. You and I need to be the ones that share that light to a world that is in complete darkness. A light that says, there is hope and healing. There is love and mercy in Jesus Christ today. Come and find this light today. Jesus, that's why He said you must be a city on a hill. And you must let your light so shine that men will see your good works, and they will glorify the Lord. They will glorify God. I ask you a question in closing this morning. If there was a camera on you, and we watched your works wherever you went, other than Sunday mornings, what kind of score would you get on glorifying the Lord? Would your light shine so bright that men and women would want to glorify the Lord because of your works? Or is there too much world in there and there's no light being reflected at all? That's a hard question. It hurts. But that's what Jesus Christ said we have to be. Is we have to let our works through Him shine so bright that men and women want to glorify the Lord. What would our world be like if more of God's children said, I'm going to be a light in a dark world. The darkness can come upon me, but I will shine so bright through Jesus Christ that the darkness will have no hold here. How do we do that? I did a little research because I always heard this, but I wanted to know the answer, so I did a little research. They said if it's a perfectly clear night, perfectly clear, and you light a single candle, they said that single candle can be seen for over 2 miles. And they said the only reason that candle can't be seen for over 2 miles is because of the way the earth slopes, and the earth is round. But they said if you could put it up on the top of a mountain, that the human eye could see that candle for up to 30 miles. I did search on the internet, so you can take it with a grain of salt. But think about that. One single little candle in a complete darkened world, when set on top of a mountain, can be seen for 30 miles. You and I, we don't need to shine for 30 miles, I'll be honest with you. We need to shine within a few feet. When we walk around, we need our light shining just in a few feet. Can you imagine what a city, a room would look like full of Christians shining God's light? The darkness would have nowhere to hide. There would be no place left for the darkness to go. The light would shine so bright that it would be completely obliterated. That's what you and I need to do. You and I need to make a commitment this morning to say, I'm going to be that one candle sitting on a hill for anybody to see. And I don't care what darkness tries to come, that light will outshine any darkness because Jesus Christ has already won the victory. Jesus Christ has already won, and darkness can do nothing to me. So this morning, I have a prayer that I gave you in the bulletin this morning. I have a prayer for you this morning, and this is our prayer. This is our prayer for not just today. This is our prayer going forward, is what this is. I want to read it to you this morning. Our prayer is, I pray today that you expose my sins to me. Ouch. The light has to start on us, folks. We can't go and we can't be a light to others if there's so much sin that God's light can't shine through. So first thing we have to ask is, God, expose my sins to me. Shine as a light on them that I may understand and seek forgiveness before you. You and I, on our knees, seeking forgiveness before the Lord. Then, help me to become a light to my family, friends, and community, that they may see you, Jesus, shining through me. Simple prayer. Very, very simple.